Welcome to another episode of the Leverage Podcast. Today's episode I am especially excited about, given that I am personally a bit of a brand nerd. For those of you who don't know, I did launch and run my own brand for about 6 years, and I have a marketing background. And I just absolutely love how these incredible brands are so detailed and so thoughtful in how they're created. And so our guest today has been labeled the father of brand DNA. He is a constructive disruptor, I hear, and his name is Peter Wilken. Peter, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me, John. It's really a great pleasure. And yeah, and our little pre-discussion, I think I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I think it's going to be of hopefully real interest to your listeners, your entrepreneurs and solopreneurs out there.
I think it will. Well, one thing I didn't mention in the intro is another thing I'm a huge fan of is the show Mad Men. And I usually just watch sports on TV, so I actually just binge watched Mad Men just a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So it is fresh in my mind. Huge John Hamm fan at the moment. And I just absolutely loved that show because I've worked at agencies, Omnicom agencies over here. And so I wasn't in the golden age of advertising, but I've known some people who were, and I could see glimpses of it from that show. I was thinking, oh, I bet some of the leaders who I used to work for experienced this, and you enjoyed the tail end of the golden age of advertising from what it sounds like.
Yeah, I was so lucky. I mean, you can see I've got the kind of the gray hair and the age here. I'm a kind of last of the surviving dinosaurs from that age, but it truly was. I wasn't. I mean, that was set in the 50s and 60s, and I started in the early 80s, but it wasn't that far off, and certainly that twilight was still there. And people ask me, I do all of these talks on brand strategy and creative strategic thinking and stuff, and at the end of it, people basically come back and say, hey, what was it like? Was it really like what it was? And it was frighteningly close.
Wow.
It was very accurate, and you could see just how things had evolved. I was lucky. I ended up kind of working for BBDO, running their Asia Pacific operation out of Hong Kong, and before that, I had time with Leo Burnett and 11 years at Ogilvy in London. And there were so many aspects of that Madman show that were right. People say, "Oh, was it still misogynistic?" And yes and no. Then, I mean, the whole world has changed with wokeism and political correctness and what you can and can't say.
Sure.
But actually, I found it the opposite. Some of the best bosses I had were women, were female, including the top boss, Charlotte Beers. There were more powerful, empowered women in that industry, 40 years ago than in any other. And that was one of the things that made it great. Trying to deal with the John Hamms and the creative people. I mean, my equivalent there, I would have started off as the young guy, Pete, the kind of young greenhorn, kind of bit cocky, kind of trying to kick ass, and ended up doing the Roger, trying to, run the show and herd the cats. Was there all that sex and drugs and rock and roll and all of that? Yes, in spades. And it was the thing that would not ever fly in today's politically correct world. But the reality is it still happens. We're still human,
Right.
Anyway, so yeah,
that's incredible. Well, I remember at the end of this show, it's interesting because the whole show is about advertising, right? And it's specifically advertising, not marketing. Advertising. And in one of the later episodes, somebody started mentioning the 4 Ps of marketing, and it cracked me up because I have a marketing degree, and so I remember the 4 Ps. Let's see if I can. We got price, product, place, and promotion. Is that right, Professor?
Yeah, and absolutely. I would kind of hark back though to saying, when I first started, the world was changing already, but the ad agencies then were much smaller. They were much more distinctive. They kind of reflected the personality of the owner. So David Ogilvy or Leo Burnett, their beliefs were kind of deeply instilled in the agency. The cultures were different.
Mm.
They were more strategic partners to their clients. And it sounds cocky, but they were the smart guys in the room, and we would be strategic business partners that sold business solutions for clients. How do we sell more Pepsi? How do we, get people to, invest in Shell? Do we sell more Financial Times or increase our readership? And the advertising, the core creative ideas that kind of drove that were almost, and that sounds an exaggeration, but really almost a byproduct of the strategic consulting that was done by the agency.
Okay.
Then over the years, it changed dramatically into these, mass hub and spoke produced creative, efficient kind of networks that could, develop ideas in 3 or 4 key hubs: London, New York, wherever, Asia, Hong Kong, and then replicate out. And so the world of advertising has changed a huge amount since I started in it.
Well, that was a question I had while watching the show. Obviously it's made for TV, right? So you're not going to have like every single aspect of what an ad agency actually was, but it was very focused on here's a pitch for a TV commercial idea.
Yeah.
Right. And so my question is, during your time in that world at these big agencies, was it that simple? Has marketing become so much more complex since then? Obviously, social media, you've got all these various touch points that we see. Or did Mad Men, because it was made for TV, just focus on one aspect when those agencies were actually doing a multitude of things?
Oh, we did a multitude of things. I mean, but they went for the kind of pinnacle of the glamour side, and then that was big impactful TV commercials. Then at the time, obviously, the agencies work across multimedia. Then it was traditional media, so print, radio, press, TV, cinema, and then in later days, obviously, the digital media and social media that has come in, and they're just a different media. That's what people kind of don't get. The principles of what great communication, great advertising, great marketing, great strategy have not changed. The medium or the execution in which they're delivered have. But where you were going was saying, was there more science to it than that? And yes, obviously there was. I mean, and where you were earning big fees from your clients. And again, in the early days, that all changed, the fee management system. But in the early days, agencies would earn a fat 15% commission on your media spend. So it wasn't actually directly related. And you would almost justify that fee by investing in strategic insight. So we had large strategic planning groups, and we would do research from intel. We didn't have the internet then, so you couldn't just click a few buttons and do an instant search. We didn't have AI now who can actually format it and structure it for you and give you the answer without you actually even engaging your gray matter, which is a slight concern. We would have libraries and Mintel Market Intelligence and countless other kind of research companies, research arms, Cantor, and others that we would fall back on. So there was hard work and grit. We would do hand-done, competitive analysis. So there would be thought behind and insight behind the ideas that were generated, and then the execution of the ideas once sold in were different. That said, there was always that magic pixie dust, which the kind of show also says, which it takes a fraction of a second for a great creative idea to come to fruition.
Right.
And honestly, it sounds cliche, but I can remember going into a creative pitch and really not having a great idea at all, and sitting there with a creatives in the cab, on the way to pitch this idea, and thinking, we're not really happy with what we've got, and getting an idea in the cab on the way to the pitch. and telling the cab driver to go round Berkeley Square 3 times so that we could just basically agree it. And we binned everything that we had and pitched verbally our creative idea, which won. So it happens. When it's
Wow.
under the things like that sound contrived, but that exactly happened. So there was always that element, and which I loved about that world of, here's all the rules, here's the system, here's the structure, and you can chuck it all away if you've got something that just feels instinctively right and brilliant.
That's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, because, yeah, I mean, you can't just bet on, oh, this guy's got great ideas all the time. And you want to have that research. And especially nowadays, it's probably just, whether you need it or not, it gives your client some little more trust in you. Maybe like, hey, surveyed hundreds or thousands of or millions of people, and the research says XYZ, and so this idea, maybe sometimes that all that research and everything is just to justify, hey, I got this really good idea, but here's why you should take my word for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a very famous David Ogilvy quote on research, which is, most people use research like a drunk uses a lamppost, for support.
Yeah.
And that was all often the case. People covering their backsides, and
Right.
making sure that they didn't make mistakes or errors or get fired. But rather than using it to illuminate a path, I always liken it to finding the gold seam in the mine. You may not absolutely stumble on it, but you can find out where you're most likely to find it. The kind of mineral layers that gold lies in, or that the diamonds lie in. And you found that, the chances of you increasing and finding a diamond. And when you found a diamond, recognize what it looks like, because it doesn't shine and glisten and cut in a beautiful diamond pattern. When you find it, it's rough cut. You may not even looks like a crystal. So yeah, and then that's how you hone it. So,
well, and then there's another aspect. A lot of people who haven't been in the advertising agency like you and I have been behind the scenes, me much less than you, of course, but I remember speaking with a creative director of mine one time, because I'm an idea guy. I've got some creative ideas, and I think I mentioned some idea to him, and I was like, hey, it would be a really great ad for XYZ. He said, John, that is a good idea. But he said, John, a lot of people have good ideas. But what really matters is when you can come up with a good idea that is consistent with the client brief.
Yeah.
That matches, and he just laid out basically all of these filters of like, it has to match all of these things that the client is looking for.
Yeah.
And be a great idea. Not just be a random idea that's just fun and creative.
No, absolutely. I mean, the advertising was a business, and we were constantly reminded, you can do wonderful, weird and wacky stuff that kind of gets out there and gets noticed, but unless it's relevant, unless it actually sells your clients products or raises their awareness or their reputation or whatever the brief is, it's not doing its job. So it's a business tool first and foremost.
Right.
But in order to do business, it needs to kind of justify its intrusion. So it has to be, instructive or educational or entertaining or insightful or inspiring, or all of those things rolled into one if you can do it. The one thing I would say about having kind of worked with great creative ideas up front is that, it's not formulaic. And, if you have too many rules and you're trying to squeeze in too many things within a box, you restrict your opportunities to be able to do something that changes things dramatically. And, there's two levels of great creative work. One is, or genuinely what I would call brilliant creative work. One is craftsmanship, which is kind of being the best at crafting what you're doing, within a genre. You can look at films and things like this, and some of the techniques that are used now to kind of tell a story in a right way and create impact, and dialogue and great casting and all of those kind of things. That's real craftsmanship, but you might still be in a genre. The second thing is much more difficult, but much more impactful, which are genuinely original ideas you've never seen before, that break the mold, that can't be related to anything else, that define a category. Those are the ones that shake the world up. You know, the first time Jaws came out, you know, whoa, or whatever. You know, I'm going way back now, but
Right.
you see, and you can tell instinctively when you've got something kind of unique and different. Those are very, very rare, and there's great skill in there. But being able to recognize them is key, because if you're following the rule book,
Mm-hmm.
you never get those. You never get those. And sometimes you have to go back to a client and give them what they need, just not what they want. You know, you give them what they want,
Yes.
but what you think they need second. And so many times we did that. They won't listen to you unless you listen to them, with all and every, you know, they're right to do that, you know. So
Sure.
let's say I've heard this is what you want from your brief, you know. You want to be positioned as the authority in your category. You know, you want, you know, your growth to come through this particular target audience. You want to appeal to a younger group. You want to do all of this, and this is what we've done. You know. However, we think you can go broader. Bam, we've done this. Bam, we can do that, and
Right.
that's how you kind of go further or push it. And you're a creative guy. You've worked in the ad agencies. You know how it is. It's so many, unless you've got that creative instinct, creative people and thinkers don't start, or stop rather, at the first right answer. They go into further right answers and even better right answers.
Yep. Well, I'm curious, is if there is a single campaign or a single idea, or maybe even just a single ad that is your favorite, whether you were part of it or it's just work from somebody else that you appreciate.
Oh my God, there are so many brilliant ads out there, and now you put me on the spot. I should be able to think about that. I'll give you one that's nothing to do with me, but really hugely admire and everyone will relate to. And I'll give you one that was something to do with me, which is kind of less well known, but you would appreciate it. The first one is obviously the great Apple 1984 commercial that Chiat Day did, and
Yeah.
I had a conversation the other day with the great Terry O'Reilly, who's got this very long-running show, Under the Influence, which is brilliant. And he and I are kind of contemporaries. And he was actually a copywriter at Chiat Day at the time they were doing that. So I asked him, I said, look, is the myth true that the client actually got cold feet and rejected that ad, and before they ran it? I don't know if you know the story. It very nearly didn't see the light of day. It ended up running once in the Super Bowl and changing the world for Apple completely.
Wow.
And he said, that is absolutely true, and all credit to Chiat Day. You know, the client got nervous feet about how much we were spending on that potential Super Bowl, and asked us to, pull the budget back. And well, we did, but we just weren't very fast about doing it, and we couldn't.
Very clever.
Very clever. And ended up running this ad, which the client was very nervous about. And of course, that's the one with the one who runs up with a hammer and the big brother's screaming at you at the screen. And 1984 won't be there. That's 1984 again. Bam, crash. So that is a huge thing that admires, because it's a great demonstration of how on the edge great creative ideas are, and they don't die, they stay there, whether you use them or not sometimes, and right. Sometimes just isn't right. So that one personally, I look and I think, oh God, I'd love to be involved in that. And I said to Terry, wow, that's great, that's an iconic thing. We did so many great campaigns through over our time. Pepsi was a huge client, Coke was one of ours. Shell International, we did tons of brilliant work for them. Guinness, fantastic campaigns. The Rutger Hauer campaign, Pure Genius, that changed that brand. One of the ones I'm going to tell you about was a slightly lesser one, but it will give you an insight into how we went about it and thought about it as an agency, and how I think nowadays it's a more accepted protocol to involve your clients if your clients have got that right modal creative thinking capability as well.
Yeah.
And this is for a campaign for Mirinda, which was Pepsi's equivalent to Fanta, their orange drink.
Mm.
And and I'm not sure whether you're aware of it now. It's an old campaign, but some people will remember it. It was the Orange Man campaign, and what we had the account, but it was positioned to children, and it was using Looney Tunes, so Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny, and it was reasonably successful. But they wanted to expand the franchise out and make this much broader to younger teens. It's still a sweet, sugary soft drink, so it wasn't going to go to adults, but they wanted to make it a little bit broader in its appeal, beyond children, which it was very young children. And we actually involved the clients in a tissue generation session at their offices in White Plains. And normally, in those days, the creative agencies, and even within the agencies, the creative departments would kind of take ownership of it. This is ours. You'd go into the big black box, and then they'd kind of come out like a butterfly from a chrysalis and saying, "Here's our ideas," and this. And you needed to do a little bit of that to control the process and systems, but we did that very differently. We had a great creative client who was a creative thinker themselves, and they had an environment that fostered great ideas. And so we involved them literally as if we were in the first brainstorming idea generation session for a new campaign for Mirinda. And we literally covered the walls with ideas. We must have had 100. And we narrowed them down to about 15 or 20 that had some ideas. And one of them was the Blue Man Group. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, the New York thing. At that time, they had not really made it huge. They had just, I think, made their first steps onto Broadway. Maybe not. They come up from this kind of street thing. And if anyone's not familiar with the Blue Man Group, there's this amazing mime group with 3 bald men all painted blue, and they play the drums, and they have this amazing kind of visual effect with paint. This, and they're kind of mime artists meets music, and very strange, very different, very arresting. And the idea was very simple, that one of the blue men turns orange. And
I like that.
And it went huge because they were so irreverent, and you could imagine the expressions, and because they were silent, they didn't speak any language. Boom, you kind of burst around, and we'd have these 2 blue men banking, and then look around, and they'd do a double look, and boom, one of them's gone orange, and it was Mirinda.
Well, and the global
it went
reach opportunity global. Because they're not saying
it ran in 25 markets, like everyone producing all their own with no thing. It ran for 15 years or something more. The Mirinda Orange Man, you can still find it in some countries. And the skill there was creating the environment where you can recognize and nurture a great creative idea. And that's something for your listeners to think about as well when they're doing it for clients, because so many big ideas don't start out as big ideas. They start out as small ideas, little seedlings that are easily crushed underfoot, normally pecked to death. They need fertile soil, they need protecting from the crows, there's always something who's going to find something wrong with them. And let that seedling grow. You don't know. It may be a weed that wilts in an hour or 2 or a few days. It may be, a cactus, prickly and dry, or it may grow into a mighty oak. But give it a chance. And the best agencies and the best creative people create that fertile, incubating environment. And that was an example of something that grew and grew and grew. I also found, and you I don't know whether you'll find it in the book, that great ideas polarize people. You can tell when you've got something really exciting because it scares half the group and it excites the other half. And they end up going whooshing into opposite corners very quickly and having battles. And typically in most conservative, large bureaucratic or organizations that have got systems in place, the naysayers win, because there are more reasons to do it. It ends up coming, oh, it will cost too much. We can't take the risk. What if we upset that? And
Right.
which is why we end up with so much bland, boring crap. Sorry, I don't know whether you use that that word. And I still think, I said, when I started out, really in the early 80s and 90s, the kind of level of advertising that could be classified as insulting or terrible was probably 75% of everything that was out there, kind of insulting, talking heads, boring at you, just bang it into your skull, not funny, semi jokes, and I look at today and I think, oh my God, it's gone up from 75 to about 95%, as an industry, we've done terrible things, in terms of quality control, awful. Are there still brilliantly outstanding, exceptional, great creative ideas? Yeah, brilliant. Airbnbs and things like this. There are still always core brilliant ideas that kind of come through. And we talked a lot about advertising. Hopefully, that will give a little bit of a flavor of what it was like and why it's still relevant today. Often it's forgotten. In so much of this efficiency and so much of this. Well, the biggest thing, the digital thing that I kind of don't kick back, because it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it consumes the discussion, is performance marketing. And with digital, what's your click-through rate? Let's measure it. For all those left modal leaders who want to see, oh yeah, let's get results. Let's see what our money is doing for us. Yes, up to a point, it'd be wonderful if you can do that. But honestly, no. It's the things you can't count that count the most. How people feel, and most of these kind of click-through rates are nothing. You don't even know whether it's a bot site half the time. If you're getting genuine engagement with comments, yes, and it's rich, yeah, that's different.
And that's especially difficult in a world where every marketing manager is measured based on the CPM.
Yeah.
Right? The cost per thousand, the click-through rate, the number of impressions. Hey, I'm the CMO. I gave you this budget. We, calculate that we should reach this amount of people.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be risky, right? Because, that middle marketing manager probably isn't so incredibly passionate to try to change the world. Maybe they are, but like most times they're not. And they just want to keep their job, right?
Yeah.
And there's that statement, you never get fired for hiring IBM.
Yeah.
Well, you never get fired for doing the sports ad buy.
Yeah.
Right? Like the big game ad buy. But did you do anything other than quote unquote make all these impressions when people were really just in the bathroom during the commercials, right?
Exactly. And there's just so much of that. And I'm not trying to be holier than thou. I kind of get that. We need to pay the bills. We can't all be kind of radical disruptors that change. But frankly, actually, yeah, if you want to change the world, you've got to be unreasonable. There's that famous quote, the unreasonable man or woman, the reasonable man or woman adapts to the world. The unreasonable man or woman adapts the world to themselves. Therefore, by default, all positive change is done by unreasonable people.
Great quote. Yeah.
And we forget that unreasonableness because people are afraid that we'll get them fired or whatever it was. You talked about the IBM thing. Nobody gets fired with IBM. That was so true. In my time, we had IBM, and our campaign was "I think, therefore IBM."
Yeah, that's great.
Which was brilliant. It's like the intelligent kind of things. Anyway, that was an overly campaign, but
I love that. Well, I'll tell you the time I fell in love with advertising. Then we'll get more into specific branding insights here. But when I went to Sacramento State, got my marketing degree there, and I had a professor who was not a great classroom professor,
Yeah.
but was a brilliant real life application
Right.
instructor.
Right.
And she used to work at Leo Burnett, and so she would share these different advertisements and marketing campaigns and such. And the one that just lit me up and still does today was Altoids. And I think it's called Edward the Deer or something like that. And so for those listening and watching who haven't seen it, basically the advertisement starts with a gentleman who is half deer, half man. And he is sitting outside of a coffee shop, and he's got hooves and he's got ears
Yeah.
and he's got a human face, and he's reading his paper, holding it with his hooves, which is absolutely hilarious. And
Yeah.
he's like lapping up the coffee
Yeah.
with his tongue. And then it shows this couple who are watching him, and they're just staring.
Yeah.
And he's a bit perturbed, excuse me, can I help you with something? And they say, are those chocolate dipped Altoids? And then it zooms in with his hoof. He pushes them close to them so that they can try them. And it cracks me up every time. I share it with so many people. And in that, it just opened up my mind that, like, wait a minute, advertisements can do this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, this had nothing to do with really like the product, chocolate dipped Altoids or whatever you might say about the physical product, but
Yeah.
it captured your attention. It made you laugh.
Yeah.
Brand recall, most importantly, right? The
Yeah.
the worst thing for a marketer is you remember the commercial, but you forget the brand,
Yeah.
which happens to everybody, literally. But that was the moment I fell in love with advertising, and I want to take you over to specific branding.
Yeah.
So, because so many people misconstrue branding with a logo or with advertising, and those might be pieces of branding. But as the expert in the room, why don't you share with us, Peter, exactly what is branding?
Well, I'll give you my impression where the confusion between branding is now, and I don't use the term branding in the way in which some of the younger zillennial generations use it now, which I think is confusing.
Okay.
Branding for me was the old-fashioned sticking a sizzling branding iron on the thigh of a heifer, bam.
Right.
This is John's heifer, bang. It's got JD, bang, on you own that cow. That's right. Branding, sticks it there. So it's logo, it's identity, it's recognition. That's it. Nowadays, people use the term for branding as to convey, meaning and putting meaning onto a product or business, but it confuses it. I call that brand building. I don't use the term branding in the way that to convey meaning, because there's that confusion. Branding is sticking your hot iron on a cow, and all of that packaging. And this is how we kind of came about building our company. The brand company actually was drawing that distinction between what a brand really is. For me, a brand, it's not a tangible thing. It's a territory in the mind. That's all it is. It exists in your mind, but it's a rich territory, and it's something that's made up with, hundreds of associations that build up over time and create a solid image. And you own a higher territory the more familiar that you become with a brand, and the more associations that get linked with it.
Right.
It can be built very, very quickly in an instant, and collapsed and changed very quickly as well if you don't behave in a kind of consistent manner, or you betray what it is you stand for. And that's it. The best brands stand for something really meaningful. They have beliefs and values that you can relate to, that are consistent over time. They deliver, consistent experiences. And for me, the heart of a great brand is a promise that is relevant, that's compelling, that's differentiating, that stands you apart from your competitors, and above all is credible, that you believe it. That's the main thing. You can't make a promise that you can't keep. And
Yeah.
that's all it is. It's not brain surgery. It's simplifying it back down to that, but it's actually very, very difficult to do. And so anybody who's listening here, the young kind of solopreneurs or old solopreneurs and entrepreneurs or small company owners, don't get bamboozled by all the bullshit out there. There's so much marketing jargon. That's what your brand is. It's a promise. It's a promise that is relevant, credible, distinctive, and ownable, deliverable. That makes a difference and that you can genuinely deliver. And
Yeah.
mean it about the last one, about keeping your promises. I've written whole articles about your promises, like promising your 6-year-old grandson that you're going to buy him candy and forgetting it. Whoa, your 16-year-old grandson will never forget that you didn't buy him the candy you promised him.
Yeah.
So deliver when you say it, and don't make promises that you can't keep. I mean, it's basic. Everyone's heard it before, but people make so many mistakes. Is it all right to kind of stretch expectations and keep pushing the peanut? Yes, within limits, but you don't exaggerate and do this chest thumping things that you can, only to kind of fall down. You'll erode your brand quicker than anything else. The hard thing is finding that distinctiveness.
Yeah. And I'm hearing consistency, right?
Yep.
Which takes time. So
it does.
This is not necessarily an overnight thing. I've been a part of a lot of logo design projects, and from a design perspective, logo design projects for a client are one of the hardest things, because people confuse a logo with an illustration. Number one, a logo is not an illustration. A logo is a mark that is recognizable at a small size in one color.
Yeah.
Here's an example. That's one color. It's at a small. We would always do the pocket test. If this was embroidered on a shirt the size of the Polo logo, could you understand it? But the more difficult thing is, people would come to us and they would be looking for a logo, and so we'd present them with 2D one color marks that would work, and they'd be like, I don't know, none of these work. And the reason they have that response is because they're used to looking at logos that have built a brand built around them, right? If you look at Nike is a perfect example. You think, oh, Nike's got a great logo. Oh, what a great logo. I want a logo like Nike, right? It's like, okay, well, you've got a curved line here that we know is called a swoosh, right? It's recognizable. But the reason why you feel something when you look at that mark is because of all the incredible brand work, brand development that Nike has invested in consistently over the years. And when you see your new logo that I am presenting to you, you have no experiences around that. And you also care a lot about it because it's your company, right? And so I bring that up, that I would love for you did a great job sharing about, what branding truly is with your example there. But can you give me an example of a brand that's doing exactly what you said, so that we can kind of have a tangible piece in our mind of who's done it well over time?
I mean, so many. I can give you examples of where we came in and practiced our philosophy. I mean, you're talking about logos and icons, basically. I'm looking at one of the best examples of all, your Apple icon at the end. My company, Dolphin, is one simple dolphin and the icon. And there's many iterations of that, and you get into horizontal and vertical layouts and full color and safety zones and brand palettes and all of those colors, and all of those are really important to kind of maintain that consistency. And don't get me wrong, they're hugely important, and done brilliantly, they can convey meaning, or meaning becomes conveyed into them, and that icon can spur the thought. It can open that territory in the mind and trigger it. The Nike swoosh, I mean, as you're probably familiar with it, famously Phil Knight didn't like that swoosh when he was first presented to it.
Right.
Well, you're aware of that.
Yeah.
He rejected it, but they didn't have enough money to kind of go and do another one. So I said, okay, well, we'll run with it. Well, okay, proof pudding. You can build meaning into fantastic things, and it's such a great symbol of, Nike was the goddess of something.
The goddess of victory.
Victory, yeah.
The Greek goddess of victory. Yep.
Goddess of victory, and that tick and that winning and that kind of spirit of it carries through in that, an amazing swoosh. And the real skill of great logo and designers is to distill and boil it down into the smallest essence of something that can still convey meaning and differentiate you from all others.
Yeah.
And as you've done with Apple, is if you look at my little logo on the dolphin, is a brilliantly beautiful, super simplified dolphin. My company is tiny. People haven't seen it, but who knows? One day it might get bigger. But where we came out with the brand company was, and where we saw the gap, with all due respect, because it's a real skill, the design side. However, it is what we termed the superficial packaging of brands. It's not the substance of what really differentiates people's affinity for a brand, which is the experience of the product or service. Does it actually do what it says it's doing? And does it deliver?
Yeah.
It's almost like the dressing and the clothing of a brand. And it comes at the end of it, after you've articulated your positioning, who you are, what you stand for, to whom and why you stand for. That's the core of the brand DNA. And so we were saying, look, millions and millions of dollars are being spent by advertisers, marketers, commercial organizations on the superficial packaging of their brand. And it's not just the logo, the design side, also the advertising, the communication, because they can see where the money goes. They can see it's spent, it's got an ad.
That's right.
But not the substance of the experience of the service or the product that you're delivering. So we said, look, there are so many strategies for being able to drive you towards that executional component. And don't get me wrong, it's not unimportant. It's hugely important. Sometimes it can drive it, but it's secondary. It should come after you've determined your positioning. Again, who it is you stand for, to whom, why, and how you go about delivering it. And that's why we developed what we called the brand-centered management. So we defined, way before Simon Sinek was talking about his why, which he's done brilliantly, a brand DNA. And it comes back to why, the father of the brand DNA. And it started with your role. Why do you exist? Why does your product or service, or you as an individual, why do you exist, beyond making money, typically to serve other people? What is it that you believe in that truly stands you apart? Not generic catch-all hygiene factors like product quality and excellence, the best company to work for and with, high integrity, you can trust us. Okay, oh my God, if any of those didn't have them, why would anyone do business with you? Forget about it. What really does stand you apart? And then your overarching commitment to your stakeholders, your promise. What is it that you do for them? What's the benefit that they get from you delivering against your promise? How does it differentiate you from your competitors? Then how do you go about doing it? Your culture. Typically you're in a category that's doing or selling many things, and there are many, many other competitors. Now it's so crowded out categories. How you go about doing it is the way that differentiates you. And then what's your kind of core controlling idea or rallying cry or motto, if you like? What kind of brings it together? Not just, don't confuse that with a tagline. It's more kind of a core creative idea that can result in a tagline. And then we're talking about the icons and the logos and the things that spur and create, that stick there, and then open the door up to this territory in the mind that opens all that richness. And so that's what the brand company was all about. That's what Dim Sum Strategy, the book, is about. How to build organizations and drive. It was basically change management from a brand perspective, and we would help, and I still do help organizations define their brand DNA and use that as a beacon, if you like, on the top of a lighthouse to drive change throughout the organization, starting with their corporate strategy, starting with their internal communications and their culture, how they walk the talk within their own organizations, then getting into systems and structures that can enable or hinder them from delivering their promise, then the products or services themselves, which is typically where the interface is with the customer, then the communications about it, which should reinforce your promise, then right back to how your customers actually experience it, which should be reflecting your DNA. So sounds complex. It's not, but it takes the brand to a whole higher level. And again, and it comes back to the role that I've been playing, which is effectively a fractional CBO or chief brand officer, where the brand is this strategic tool. It's not just a logo. It's
Right.
that drives your whole organization. Every CEO should be a CBO. And if they're not a CBO, they should have a CBO in their right or left-hand side.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to get into how the solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and real estate agents who are listening to this podcast can do this for themselves. But first, let's take a listen from a message from our sponsor.
Business owners and entrepreneurs will place a proven executive assistant VA for just $4 to $8 an hour, and if they don't perform, you don't pay. Imagine freeing up 20 plus hours a week by someone handling your most time-consuming tasks like admin work, managing emails, scheduling meetings, and so much more. This one hire could transform your productivity and give you back the time you need to focus on growing your business. At Sphere Rocket VA, we make this possible in as little as 7 days. We'll place a proven executive assistant VA in your business for just $4 to $8 an hour, and your VA will take over day-to-day administrative tasks, help manage your email and calendar, follow up with past clients, giving you back 20 plus hours a week so you can increase your sales and even enjoy more personal time. And here's the best part. If they don't give you back 20 plus hours a week in the first month, you don't pay Sphere Rocket a dime. We've done this for thousands of business owners, and now it's your turn to see the results. Click the link around this video to schedule a demo and discover how this one hire can completely change how you run your business. Remember, if within 45 days the VA doesn't perform, you don't pay.
All right. So a lot of folks listening might be thinking, okay, great. You've been part of these mega agencies. There's $1 million budgets. But look, I'm working by myself for myself. I'm trying to make ends meet. I want to create a brand that you're talking about. But Peter, I don't have millions of dollars. Share with us, how can a solopreneur and entrepreneur simply but effectively create their own brand?
Great question, John. And I should say, don't be over impressed by the big corporate roles and big brands and names. Yeah, that was great. It was a fun ride, and I was super fortunate. And you need some luck to kind of get there. But I've spent the bulk of the last 20 years running my own small company with a diversion into an alternative energy company as an entrepreneur. I know the sticks and stones. I deal now with my own online community in the Lighthouse Brand Builders community, mainly with solopreneurs, small business owners, and aspiring brand strategists. And I work with virtual teams and consulting to a group of clients here, almost as a solopreneur. Pretty much, I have a small virtual team, so I can completely relate to where you are. And here's what I have to say to you, and it's absolutely no bullshit. The principles of building these great multi-million-dollar brands with those huge kind of global enterprises are exactly the same as they are for building a small startup brand. And what I've been talking to you about crafting brand DNAs and driving a brand-centered management program work equally well across all categories. So I've done that work for a kind of small YouTube startup companies, a great men's hair care product here called Blue Man, that 12 people sitting in an operation here, very, very smart people, well read, CEOs 24, and looking to expand their business. They manufacture offshore, they distribute worldwide now, very smart digital marketers, but started very, very small. Charitable foundations, university departments, whole cities, can actually use the same process. But back to you, if you're sitting here thinking, oh, well, how does this really work for me? The principles are exactly the same. You go back, think about and ask those questions. What is it that I stand for? So many brands stand for nothing.
Right.
And if you're asking, well, what do you stand for? I hope with my lighthouse, I stand for three things. Clarity, being absolutely clear who it is that you stand for. Compass, knowing what direction that you're going in, and also a bit of a moral compass, where are you doing the right thing? I like doing and helping, good people who are doing good things. And courage is the last one. Really having the confidence to be able to go off and do your own authentic thing, and doing that all within the currency of creative strategic thinking differently, not necessarily following the rules, but or using the rules to your advantage or bucking them. And you can do that. You don't have to do that expensively. And I'm not trying to plug anything else. There's great, tools out there, but that my dim sum strategy book tells you how to do that, how to craft a brand DNA. The brand center management we boiled down into a simple 4Ds process. That's been adopted by thousands of brand operators around the world. I've seen it come back as 3Ds, 5Ds, whatever it was, but that was the original one. Discovery, direction, defining or definition, defining a brand DNA, direction, strategically how you interpret that, and delivery, how you execute that in multiple ways to bring that change about, all guided by your brand DNA. And so you can apply that to your business, whether or not you're in real estate or not. I mean, real estate is so competitive, tough market these days, but it becomes formulaic. So you can see the category conventions. Everybody has a picture of their faces. It's typically on the back of a bus, where you're driving, because you can see all posters around bus stops because it's in a local area, and that's fine, and it's visible, and you want to establish a personal relationship. It's not wrong. It's there. It's kind of direct marketing, and you're active. But typically, the best real estate agencies, it's a relationship-driven business, and trying to break out of the category conventions and think a little bit differently, but be your authentic self. Be passionate about certain things. Maybe there's types of properties that you really love, that you're passionate about and that you can be an expert in, and means you have to stretch your geography out a little bit more to get it. But it's all, you're a waterfront property specialist or something. And again, don't get me wrong, you don't have to narrow down so much. It's not necessarily a type even, it's a way of thinking. Maybe it's connecting with a group of people like you. So, if you come in and if you're an active, sporting, young mother, for example, who's got real estate in, and the practicalities of juggling, school runs and kids who are demanding, and husbands who still need looking after and feeding families, and are looking for properties that can fit in your lifestyle, and you can relate to them, and so you begin to narrow focus at least where your value is, and what difference that you can make, and follow the principles of what make great brands great, which is having that relevant, compelling, differentiating promise that you deliver on. And do it in a small sphere. Build your castle where your metaphorical castle where you can own it. Build a moat around it, and then expand out. Don't try and ring fence Texas, as I would say. You spend your whole life trying to protect it. Don't start off trying to beat the world and be the biggest real estate realtor in your province, in your town or your state. Start off with something that is achievable. Find a good hill, and build a stone castle. One turret at first, then you can expand it out, dig a moat around it, defend it, let people know where you are, and be happy. Owning a castle.
I felt like I just got a direct teaching session there. Like I was in your office coming in with a brief, and you're saying, hey, this should be your, this should be your brand specifically for real estate agents. It's so cool to think about embracing your personality, right? Some self-evaluation of what do I do? What is my life experience? Okay, what groups of people relate to that, right? How can I build trust, build relationship, build community,
Yeah.
right? That then when somebody who is in this sphere is looking for a home solution, they're coming to me because they trust me, because I understand them, because we're the same people.
Yeah. I mean, we know there's so many, everyone's got all the answers for the frameworks now, and you've seen it before, but I mean, you start with saying, kind of, who am I targeting? Honestly, I think is a really good starting point. And so many people are told, especially if you're listening to a strategist, narrow focus down. I use this example. I actually heard this example from somebody saying, "Oh, you're into pets management, or it's dogs that you're right, especially dogs. Oh, but you're not into dogs. You're into dog walking. But you're not into dog walking. You're into dachshund walking. I say, okay.
Yeah.
Or you go narrower. But I say, look, you don't have to go that kind of narrow. Typically, in my experience, even if you're a huge global enterprise or a small solopreneur, there will be 3 or 4 different segment groups for whom your product or your offering or your service is going to be relevant. And but it needs to be, the promise can be the same, but it needs to be articulated or communicated in a different way, in a language that's relevant to each of them. But don't do more than 3 or 4. If you try and do 20, you're dead. And that's the same whether or not you've got every dollar in the universe, and whether you're a Tesla with billions of dollars to spend or not. You're not going to appeal to a certain group of people who are always going to be on a gasoline internal combustion engine type thing, because they're not interested in clean EVs or whatever. So narrow it down to 2 or 3 what I call practical segments. And then say, what is the pain point or the problem that you really solve for them? I actually like to think of it in a positive as well. What's the opportunity that you can give them? So many people don't think about opportunity. They think about just taking the pain away, but actually there's opportunity, or I picture the positive way.
I love that. A lot of people make the mistake. They don't want to miss out on customers, right? So like, oh, I got to appeal to everybody. But the truth of the matter is, if you're appealing to everyone, you're appealing to nobody.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely,
and so,
John, absolutely. Great point.
So a message to the real estate agents out there, as well as the other entrepreneurs with different types of businesses, is exactly what Peter is saying. Identify your tribe.
Yeah.
You made a point, 3 or 4 different targets there that are associated with that target, it sounds like. And then make sure that you're appealing to them specifically and individually.
Yeah.
In the way that they need to be talked to, the way that they understand. Some may be a little bit more casual over here with this one, and then you might be a little more formal over here, but it's still the same group of your sphere, your main target. It kind of sounds what you're saying there.
Yeah, let me give you an example. I mentioned that Blue Man, hair care product thing again, and they had many targets. We did an exercise to be able to, visualize what their target segments were, but boiled it down to kind of 3 basic different ones. One which was the Joe wannabes. They had a very good-looking founder speaker who was into hair products and had his great, YouTube channel and 1 million views and things like this. Good-looking guy, very inspirational. And so there was like young I want to be Me Too Joes, kind of, who would be 12 to 14-year-old boys, young men who were trying to emulate them very young, using their parents' credit cards to pay for the products, and needed a very different kind of appeal to what we called, the the blue collar bar boys and actually white collars, which were the young professionals who were very self-confident, and they actually fragmented into two sides. The truck drivers on one side, with the two truck drivers who would come in, and the besuited McKinsey consultants. Also, they shared the common value of wanting to look great and feeling good through their hair, through
right.
these hair products. But they required a very much more different approach. And their third group were the professional retail hairdressing salons and franchises who were buying their products in bulk, who may not actually share the same looking style values, but needed a professional approach, and the qualities of the products and services that were being communicated were the same, but communicated in a very different way. So that's a great example of practical segmentation, but keeping your promise exactly the same. It was all, their promise was around Marakai, which was basically on your hair, in your soul. When you use our products, you're going to feel so self-confident and happy in yourself. You'll find your best self through your hair. So I can remember having done that, and that's 8 years old now, and
yeah,
when you've got a really good kind of creative idea or promise that comes from developing your brand DNA, which requires work and some discovery work, it sticks.
I love that. Well, time flies when you're having fun. We've been going for a little while here, so I want to give you an opportunity to share about, with the last question here, please share about the Lighthouse Brand Strategy Academy and community and what you're doing there.
Oh, yeah, okay. No, thanks for asking. Yeah, well, one of the things I do, apart from my consulting, I do consulting to just a handful of anchor clients in and around Greater Vancouver here, which is old style, eat what you kill, get involved, strategy done for you and with you. I do speaking around creative strategic thinking, and now the human edge of, how we can differentiate ourselves from the AI world, and using my experience in brand building and advertising. And then the third part, which I'm really passionate about, is the Lighthouse Brand Strategy Academy, which is my kind of give back. And it's basically an online community for solopreneurs and small business owners interested in building a stronger business through their brand. And, they've heard all and read all of this jargon maybe about brands, but they don't quite understand how to go about building it in a practical way. It's also for designers and aspiring strategists who want to just up their strategy game. But it's very practically oriented. In my experience, so many of these courses and the Udemy's and things like this are, lectured from professors behind lecterns in universities. With due respect, half of them have never been outside in the business world, have never actually experienced or done it in the trenches. Some have, and don't get me, don't fire me with criticism, but very, very few have. Typically, they haven't. And it's very textbooky, it's very academic and intellectual. And yeah, there's a place for that, but this is focused on practical applications. So I have a course called the CBO Masterclass, the Chief Brand Officer Masterclass. In that, it's like 6 modules, 45 kind of structured, short 5 to 8 minute videos, and it takes you through the brand center management process, how to conduct a discovery report, what the 5 C's of that are, your customer, your category, your key competitive frames, so on. What it takes to help define, a rich, differentiating, core idea. So that the 3 truths of what your brand is, of, your consumer truth, the category truth, and the brand truth. How to use your discovery insights to create a report that's lasting and meaningful and action oriented and goes beyond just the executional component of a logo or a design, but into the strategic side. How to craft your brand DNA, doing your role, your core beliefs, your overarching promise, your benefits, your culture, how you go about doing it, and your core controlling idea, and then icons, all of that kind of done in a kind of succinct way. And then also it leads into, how you take your brand DNA and bring it to life in an organization through direction and creating strategic frameworks that are practical, and how you bring third parties in to deliver it in multiple ways. So that's the CBO masterclass in it. And the other thing I've added to it is a community and circle. So it's a small community, but you get to share your journey. So it's not just me, and we have kind of bi-weekly live sessions and cohorts. One is just an open session for discussing anything you want about building a brand. Another one guides you through the CBO masterclass. I've got that actually after this is my little group.
Cool.
It's intimate, that's what I do. Don't aim to kind of change the world, but it's why the lighthouse? Because the lighthouse is a wonderful metaphor for building a strong business through your brand. Lighthouses are buildings with purpose. They're built to last for centuries. They're built on solid foundations of rock. Those rocks are unchanging beliefs or values. It has a bright beacon that helps you kind of lift the fog. It has foghorns as well. It controls a kind of territory, but that beacon shines out a kind of light, and it says that, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. This is how we operate. Do you believe in what I believe in? If so, come to the light. And if not, that's fine. You're not for us. But what people don't realize is that every single lighthouse in the world has a unique flashing pattern, either a different number of beams or a different color, red or white.
I didn't know that.
So every lighthouse in every location is unique, and you can tell exactly who you are, and it commands and owns that territory. So hence the lighthouse and the Lighthouse Brand Strategy Academy. So yeah, if anyone's interested, check it out. I'll send you the links, or John, you can get the links in there. So the other thing is, the aim is supposed to democratize effective brand strategy, because I see so much not good strategy out there, or so many people, faux experts, who can get their chat or Claude or Perplexity or whatever it was to give them a strategic outline and look plausible, but it falls flat the first time you kind of try and talk through it. This is really there to kind of give you the confidence that you can do it and practice it, and have confidence in yourself that you've got the authority to have some strategic capability that will differentiate you and add value to your clients. So yeah, that's it. Democratizing effective brand strategy. So it's affordable, and it's accessible, and it's practical. It's easy to adapt. Thank you.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for. What a great tool. So for all those listening, we will look at the description. We'll have links to that in the episode. But Peter, I could talk to you for hours, but we've just got one. So I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your incredible career with us today. Thank you for joining me on the Leverage Podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure, and hopefully listeners got something out of it. My pleasure.
My pleasure.